why this book? And why now? And I ask this question because there's been a lot of conversation about globalism, globalization. Marina mentioned we see it in the news all the time. So why now? Why this book? Why was there a single catalyzing, if I can use that word, event that made you think you wanted to go deeper into the research to offer your own commentary?
There was, and it was in 2009. It was after the financial crisis, and I'm living in New York. And we saw how angry people were at the bankers and at AIG, and how they were lied to, and how the behaviors were predatory. And we saw Occupy Wall Street. And I thought to myself, there are a lot of people that feel the system is rigged. There are a lot of people that feel like they've been lied to. I need to write this book. And I didn't write it. And I didn't write it because I thought to myself, it takes a year to put a book together and to write the book. I even if it didn't matter much, it's people like me that are complicit with the fact that we allowed our countries to get as rigged as they have. It's people like me that were going to Davos and were making money from the CEOs and the banks and not writing books like this. We can't really complain much. This is how you get Trump and Bernie Sanders and AOC and Brexit and the Jean Genet, the yellow vests in France, because people like me, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, or in my case, I've never been a part of any political party, but when I had an opportunity, yes, applaud that, please, applaud that. But we didn't do as much as we could have. And especially for those of us that are fortunate enough to have a megaphone, fortunate enough to have people actually come and listen, or be able to write a book that people will actually read, that's why I wrote this book. So when it came again on the back of Brexit and the Trump election, I said to myself, I've got to write this book. It's a depressing book, okay? I don't know how many of you have actually read it. I'm an upbeat guy. For me, this book feels like the book I would have written 30 years ago about climate if I were a climatologist, right? Which is like, wow, the science seems pretty clear. This is a big issue. It's going to get worse. I don't know what the solutions are because they are way too nascent. Maybe it's solar, maybe it's wind, maybe it's nuclear, maybe it's cold fusion. But until we put the money in and do the experiments and see what's scalable, what I really need to do is identify the problem and get people focused on it. And that's kind of where we are with the failure of globalism right now. That's kind of where we are with us versus them right now. It is a big problem. People are not paying enough attention. Still, they're paying attention to how much they hate the Democrats, or they hate the Republicans, they hate Trump, they're never Trump, or they're always Trump, make America great again. Same thing in all these other countries. We are not yet to the point where we can identify what the potential solutions really are. So that's not the kind of book I like to write. Every other book I've ever written has been a book that's much more baked about, let's talk about scenarios, how you're going to respond, what I think this all means.
What he written down, the name of book? He wrote book, right?
Yeah, the name of the book.
What the content of this book he wrote?
He wrote a book about globalization and why it is, what's the problem with it.
Oh.
Because globalization on the outside seems to be so positive. Because it brings a lot of benefit as a whole, but it also has a lot of losers, and we have not been paying attention enough. So there are actually problems with globalization that we have not paid enough attention to. But now it became a problem again. First, it was a problem in 2008, the financial crisis. When it seemed like, hey, there is something wrong with our global financial system, and again, this started to occur with Brexit and with politicians like Trump coming to power. So there is something wrong with globalization, and in his book he's commenting on the problem of globalization, and to that extent he makes a separation between globalism and globalization, and he's going to explain that right now.
This one is much more of a call to, less call to action, call to understanding, call to engagement, that kind of thing. But that is how and why I decided to write the book. Yeah.
And in all fairness, you do offer some suggestions or
Sure.
some observations of things that are happening, and we'll dive into that a little bit further later on in the conversation. But you say the problem is the failure of globalism.
Yes.
So again, to set this foundation, what is globalism? How do we define globalism against maybe another word that is in our lexicon, globalization? What's the difference?
So I want to be very clear. When I write a book and the title is, or the subtitle, The Failure of Globalism, it is not the failure of globalization. Globalization, in my view, has been an extraordinary success. We have, in the last 20 years, taken 1 billion people out of poverty around the world. 90% of all kids by the age of 1 right now get immunizations. A baby born today, anywhere in the world, the average age life expectancy is 70. Women are getting educated. I mean, this is astonishing, and it's about globalization. I am a big fan of globalization. Globalism is the political notion that by supporting open borders and free trade and America as the global sheriff, that's going to be good for people inside the United States and these other advanced industrial democracies, that they should support that politically because they will be taken care of. And that's a lie. That's a political failure. That's our governments not paying attention to the fact that they need to be accountable and responsible to people inside their systems who are displaced by globalization. And that failure of globalism is what we are seeing now with the extraordinary anger and polarization and increasingly erosion of legitimacy of the political institutions in almost every advanced industrial economy in the world today.
What was his experience globalism? What it means?
Basically, globalism is the political movement, the political drive to open borders, to expose the United States to the global economy, because it's all good. It's all going to help us, and it's all going to get better. Globalization, yes, it was good because it lifted a lot of people out of poverty. Yes, it was good because now more and more women around the world are getting education. We see more children being vaccinated, etc.
This is globalization.
Yeah, but globalism, the notion that people in the United States, everybody would be better off, and as long as the United States opens itself up to the rest of the world, that is not true, because actually there are a lot of losers from open borders, a lot of losers from free competition within the United States. So the politicians who have been opening up, who have been exposing their citizens to globalization without looking at the positions and the interest of its individual members in society, they have failed a lot of people within the United States, because they did not protect them against the effects of globalization.
Politics.
Yeah.
Globalization.
So
global
globalism is kind of like globalization is kind of an economic movement, and globalism is more of a political movement that supports the economic movement. But it also, like politically speaking, you should also look not only at the places where you win. You cannot automatically assume that redistribution will take care of itself.
It means globalism is global policy for globalization.
It's the political
National
policy
policy.
of globalization.
Political policy
Exactly.
for globalization.
But that policy did not take into effect that there would be people who are losing. So the politicians have been selling globalization as being something that is very good for its members, and that we would all get richer, and that we would all benefit from globalization. But that is not true, because there are actually a lot of people who lose in a globalizing society, but politicians did not address it, and they do not take care of people who are losing because of globalization.
I understand.
Does that make sense to everybody? Is that kind of okay? Good.
Well, I'll follow up and actually probe it just a little bit deeper, because in some sense, if globalization
Who is he?
He's a professor at that university. He's from India. More I don't know about him.
all these gains and globalism is in support of globalization, essentially, then exactly what is the way in which globalism has failed? Is it on this promise that's not true, or is there something more insidious about the whole political system, or the classes or the elites? So what exactly is the way in which globalism's failed?
Okay, there's two ways to answer that. Let me maybe answer the big way first, since we're academics here, higher education. There was this book that you probably know called The Great Levelers. You know that book? Yeah. By, was it Schnabel? From Princeton, economic historian from Princeton. And he came out like 3 years ago, and he's looked at all of these different societies since the Stone Age. I mean, frankly, I think there's even a little bit of a treatment of the bonobos in there, right? So he goes way back. I know, I have to bring up bonobos, it's just me. But he looks at whether it's feudal or whether it's totalitarian, authoritarian, whether it's, sort of democratic and capitalist. He looks at the fact that over time, all of those societies become more unequal. And they become more unequal because people close to power find ways to ensure that they and their kids get even closer to power. So much so that they would spend $500,000 to get their kids into USC.
What mean USC?
There was a scandal going on at that time when this was recorded. There was a scandal going on where a lot of famous people were actually paying people at universities to have their children admitted to those universities. And USC is probably a substandard university. So he's making a joke that his argument is that over time, when societies become richer, then the people in power, they are going to make efforts to make society less equal in order to protect the best interest of the people around them in their immediate. So that's something that is of all times. So what he's saying, so basically he's comparing that today, so people who are rich and famous in the United States, who are paying admission committee members money in order to let their kids get in. Only he makes a joke about, even to the extent, but they're paying people $500,000 to get their kids into USC, which is not.
What do you mean USC?
It's University of I don't know.
I know, I'm confused by that myself. I mean, like Yale I got, Stanford I got, but I didn't get the USC thing. That I mean, I guess you can still apply for financial aid after that, so there's that. And there's only 3 ways historically that you fix it, that you create the 3 great levelers: famine, pandemic, state collapse, revolution, or war. It's a pretty depressing book, right? So, I mean, the big answer to your question is we've now gone a long time since the Great Depression. We've gone a long time since World War I and World War II. And a lot of our societies have had a whole bunch of people that have figured a way to game the system for their kids. And if you look at the wonderful Franklin Four article in The Atlantic over the past few months that talks not about the 0.1%, not about the 1%, but the 10% in America that have figured out a way to create guilds to pass on gated communities and access to gatekeepers to their kids, it is a very depressing read. Right? And it's the reason why a lot of Americans are saying, I don't care if you're Democrat or Republican, these people are lying to me. I don't care if you're a CEO or a banker, you're lying to me. I don't care if you're mainstream media or public intellectual, you're lying to me. Brexit, same damn thing, right? So that's the big answer. But the small answer
The system is rigged.
is
What's he say?
The system is rigged. So a lot of people feel that because there are in this society, when societies are getting richer, then what we see more or less automatically, because it's been proven that this happens over time over and over again, that people are creating small privileged groups that control those societies and then make them accessible to their kids and to the people that they are close to. So that means that there are not equal opportunity for everybody within the society. And people who are not within the society, they feel that the system is rigged. It's not open. It's in favor of them. So that's what he's saying.
there have been these drivers of disenfranchisement that are more important in some Western nations, less important than others, that have actually caused this problem. Some of it is economic inequality, much worse in the United States than in Germany, where the average worker feels better than they do in the United States. You've got anti-immigration sentiment, much worse in Germany actually than the United States after they took 1 million Syrian refugees, Merkel did, and Obama, not Trump, Obama said to Merkel, "That's awesome, I'm so glad you're doing that." We're not.
What he said? I can't hear his word.
Oh, so he's...
Just me.
It's after they took 1 million Syrian refugees, Merkel did, and Obama, not Trump, Obama said to Merkel, "That's awesome, I'm so glad you're doing that." We're not going to do that, because why would we take all... You know how many refugees the Japanese took last year from Syria? 8. Like this row, right? That's it. You can watch them, right? You can keep your eye on them. That's another reason, the anti-immigration sentiment. If you're not taking care of me, why would you bring new people in? Another reason is the back of all these people participating in failed wars. Afghanistan, Iraq, certainly the United States. I mean, if you are near a base, a military base in the U.S., you're much more likely to have supported Bernie or Trump than Jeb or Marco or Hillary, right? And then finally, you have the weaponization of this discontent in the social media space, where people only follow folks they agree with, things they like. Now, when you put those 4 reasons together, the first 3 over the last 30, 40 years, the weaponization piece really exponentially growing in the last 6, 7 years, I think you get an explanation for why this is happening, for why globalism is failing despite the benefits of globalization. There is one country, I write about this in the book, one country where this is not happening among the rich democracies in the world, and that is Japan. I mentioned one reason, no immigrants. Another is their population is decreasing, which means that even though their economy is flat per capita, they're doing a lot better, right? So the pie is being divided amongst a smaller number of people. Third, they're not angry about all the wars they fought in because they haven't fought in any for a long time, constitutionally forbidden. And fourth, and this is an interesting one, actually lower percentage of Japanese adults on social media than any of the other advanced industrial democracies. Only 39% of Japanese adults on social media, and they don't spend much time on it. So they still get their news from the same sources they got it from 30 and 40 years ago. Now, we're not about to become Japan here, right? But I always think the counterfactual is interesting. Where is this not happening, and why not? That's always interesting. Yeah.
He's talking about Japan is a more democratic country compared with the rest of the world, right?
No, I don't think he's making an argument for...
He's talking about Japan is best of democratic...
Japan is not disenfranchising. In Japan, we don't see this populism rearing its head.
He appraised Japan?
Not well appraised. No, I think he's making a case. Why do we see populism rising? So he gives 4 arguments why populism starts to occur. And then he's saying, okay, so that's something that is. So, for example, immigration, wage gaps. That's another. Then we see social media that amplifies everything. So, for example, we see immigration happening in Germany, and that's one of the reasons for people think, okay, if you cannot take care of me, why are we accepting so many foreigners into our country? You're not even taking care of me. That's why people are basically arguing against the politicians when they are why they are disenfranchising, that's why they don't believe in their politicians anymore. Another is that the gap between rich and poor. You see that the gap between rich and poor in the United States is getting bigger and bigger. Less so in Germany, but he argues that actually the gap between rich and poor is fueling populism in the United States. Then the third argument was the fourth argument was social media. What was the third argument?
You should repeat.
What was the third argument?
For why this is happening, for why globalism is failing despite the benefits of globalization. There is one country, I write about this in the book, one country where this is not happening among the rich democracies in the world, and that is Japan. I mentioned one reason
That's true. I think
for why globalism is failing despite the benefits of globalization. There is one country, I write about this in the book, one country where this is not happening among the rich democracies in the world, and that is Japan. I mentioned one reason, no immigrants. Another is their population is decreasing, which means that even though their economy is flat per capita, they're doing a lot better, right? So the pie is being divided amongst a smaller number of people. Third, they're not angry about all the wars they fought in because they haven't fought in any for a long time.
What?
Wars.
Huh? Wars?
Wars, yeah.
No wars.
Useless. Yeah, Japan didn't engage in any wars because they cannot have an army. And then number 4 is social media, because actually...
Social media, what?
Well, actually what he's saying, and I actually never thought about it, but it's an interesting argument that he says actually social media is amplifying our opinion. Because
Japan is not amplifying.
So, Japan is not amplifying. Actually in social media worldwide,
no fake news.
People follow whatever they want to follow,
so
right?
Japanese never occurs populism.
Right.
Okay, I understand what you mean.
Right. So actually in the world, so I tend to follow more of the left-wing media. But other people tend to follow, so that means that my opinion is actually getting tilted towards left opinion. But other people follow more of the right wing. So it actually drives people away from the middle, away from the center, because they are constantly feeding their opinion with one-sided stories. So that actually creates more division within societies than it brings them together. Because people are selective; they can choose whatever news they want to read, and they want to consume. But that actually is a self-reinforcing message.
Self-reinforcing message.
Self-reinforcing. That's basically so your opinion is basically being amplified and amplified and amplified because you find confirmation in social media because you only subscribe to those news. People don't. At least I don't subscribe to Fox News because I don't agree with their content and their view of the world. But actually, that is basically where I miss out because I don't hear opinions that are contrary to what I believe in the first place.
Constitutionally forbidden. And fourth, and this is an interesting one, actually lower percentage of Japanese adults on social media than any of the other advanced industrial democracies. Only 39% of Japanese adults on social media, and they don't spend much.
What is 39% what you say?
They're using social media. They're
low.
Low. Yeah.
So they still get their news from the same sources they got it from 30 and 40 years
so
ago.
same source.
Yeah.
Now
The
we're not
Nikkei
about to
Shimbun and the.
Okay.
from Japan here, right? But I always think the counter.
It means he criticized something?
No, he's just but he's saying that okay, why is it not happening? So basically, why is it so? Which counter examples do we have? So he sees many things that support his theory in Europe, in the United States, but he also sees that a country that is rich, like Japan, doesn't have populism. So why is it not occurring over there? And these are the reasons.
Interesting. Where is this not happening, and why not? That's always interesting. Yeah.
So, as a perspective for my next question, so I grew up in India before liberalization, and then I saw liberalization, and in some sense, what everybody is doing just now, trying to destroy, well, globalism, globalization. I get this feeling sometimes that I've seen the future and it doesn't work. And I recall moribund industries, cars that wouldn't run but people were forced to buy them, a complete lack of dynamism in the economy. So in some sense, we're going to have winners and losers, but ultimately you would have it with any choice that you make. And so at some point you have to make a choice, and why not go for something that's more dynamic rather than stagnant, which is the India before the liberalization.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm deeply empathetic to people in the United States on the wealthy side that are saying, look, whatever you think about these disenfranchised people, we need to support free trade. We need to support the Trans-Pacific Partnership because that's going to lead to more growth. I get that argument. It will lead to more growth. But when the overwhelming benefits of that growth go to a small percentage of the population, I'm also deeply sympathetic for why a whole bunch of people say, you know what, I need to break stuff, because otherwise these people will pay no attention to me. I mean, I don't actually believe that most of the people that voted for Brexit, or even worse, most of the young people that didn't think it was worth even bothering to vote in the most consequential referendum of their lifetimes, did so because they really believed that everything else, even if it was good for the system, was not going to be good for them. I get it. I don't think Americans are fundamentally bad people, but I think that when we feel like our families are not being taken care of, when we feel like our life expectancies for white men have actually gone down, unless you're in the top 10% in the United States in the past 34 years, I get why those people would say no to fancy facts. Look, let me be personal about this.
What he's talking?
So, this is a bridge to the Africa video.
Bridge to Africa video.
Yes.
Projects in Chelsea, Massachusetts. My mother had less than a high school education. She left to elope with my father, who was an enlisted man. She used to read the National Enquirer every week.
What did you?
She got it at the Stop and Shop down the road, and that was how I learned to read, and which is kind of cool because there were a lot of pictures and the words weren't difficult. Now, the National Enquirer, people in an education, an Institute of Higher Learning, would say, "Oh, the National Enquirer is fake news," but you know, the National.
What he said?
What he said is that actually so the question from the Indian guy, let's go back there. The question from the Indian guy was, okay, I mean, sure, I understand that you are making an argument against globalism, but globalism aims to introduce globalization. And I grew up in India where we were not globalized, and there was a very inefficient system where people were forced to buy cars that didn't run, and it basically after globalization was introduced, India benefited as a whole. They benefited a lot. In any kind of system, there are winners and losers. So why wouldn't you go? Why would you promote the most efficient system that brings this dynamism back? And he says, yeah, okay, sure, I understand that. That is a good argument if you are a white upper class person who's benefiting from globalization, yeah, I do understand that argument, but at the same time, I understand that people that are losers in that system, and that they feel like okay. I don't care what you want with your globalization, but I'm not benefiting from this, and I feel that you need to listen to me. And people have not been listening to me. People have been lying to me about the benefits of globalization. It doesn't help me. It doesn't help my family. So I'm angry. I'm pissed off. So I'm voting for, or I'm not voting, like what happened in England, where a lot of young people did not vote when there was a referendum on Brexit. I'm voting for Trump. Because I feel the system is rigged, the system is not fair. I do not have access to, I do not have the same opportunities as other people within the system who are the people, the major stakeholders who benefit from globalization. I'm not benefiting from that, so I'm pissed off. I'm voting against it. I'm saying the system.
Why he said
well. What I think
not benefit from globalization?
Because they lose their jobs. They didn't get any benefit from that. They actually.
Bremmer said?
Yeah, Bremmer said, and this is the same thing as what's happening with Boko Haram in northern Nigeria. So we think, okay, well, why do the people go? Boko Haram, obviously evil, just like Donald Trump, obviously evil. But actually, he's taking care of them. Even Boko Haram is taking care of them, and he's giving them. He's giving those women. Boko Haram is giving those women education. They give them stability. Even though the system as a whole is not good, but my family is being taken care of. The same as the people who live under the rule of Boko Haram, who are in the inner circle of the Boko Haram.
Now your
They're
opinion.
being taken care of.
Now your opinion.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.